No way I'm going to do that. So what I wanted to do today was to think a little bit more about Diathema. So this is our last diathematic talk. The next time we'll talk about Alcibiades and about what's going on in that part of the dialogue. So you might think, look, once we get to Diathema, we've reached the kind of high point, right? Here's Socrates saying, hey, I learned everything I know about love I learned from Diathema, and here's her great picture. Let me give it to you. It sounds like we should just stop. Instead, right, what happens is the drunken Alcibiades shows up crowned with violets, and instead of giving a talk about love, he gives a talk about Socrates. And it's a blast, no question. It's a great part of the dialogue. It's the most vivid part of it. Lots of ways, very gripping. And it's our best bit of Socratic biography from any of the dialogues. It's the image of Socrates that people tend to take away. And so we want to know what's going on with that. So that's for next time. Today we're going to talk about Diathema and we're going to sort of look at in the text for the sort of sum of what I said last time. So let's recapitulate a bit, just so we're all humming the same tune. Let's start with the action that begins with the cross-examination of Agatha. That sets a whole new tone for the dialogue, right? Up till then, we've had people telling us about how great a god love is, how he's very handsome and pretty, how couples are telling us he's just what we've got. If you want to know what love is, look at us. We love each other, you'll get it if you look at us. And instead we start getting, as it were, something that opens up what love is, right? So we think, look, love is a relation between two things. Now we've got three things to focus on. Before we only had one before. We've got the lover, the beloved, and the loving relation between the two. And now we've got questions like, what is it about the beloved that makes the lover love the beloved? What is it that they do when they love the beloved? So we've got a whole set of new questions that spin out for us once we move away from thinking love is some kind of object, magical object, to thinking that it's some kind of relation between things. That's already a big step. And in a way, what Diathema is going to do is she's going to take that and run with it. Right? So the first step in her discussion is to say this. Well, what is it, in fact, that people love? No, what is the thing that people love? Well, let's take a quick look. For everything that you love, there can be a question. Why do you love it? But at some point, the why questions have to stop. Right? They have to stop, otherwise your explanation for why you love anything will collapse back down. You won't have given a reason why you love anything. If there's always a perpetuating why question that's significant, right? You can still say more. And she says, well, there's only one thing that everyone is in love with no further question, and that's their own happiness. So nobody asks, she says, why do you want to be happy? But everyone takes that as a showstopper. And that ends the deal. So happiness is just a name of whatever it is that puts an end to all of the why questions. We don't have to ask this, well, what is that? I've told you what it is, the thing that puts an end to the why questions, and now it's got a bit more content than that because you sort of free associate a little bit in connection with what happiness is. It's some sort of thing that's enjoyable, pleasant, good. But you don't have to fill out the content. The idea is that eudaimonia is introduced simply as whatever it is that ends those why questions. That there must be such a thing till it is. Well, if there are going to be any practical reasons at all, there must be something like that. Good? Yeah? All right. So And then the next question, and we're recapitulating, the next question is, yeah, okay, so we all want to be happy, and therefore notice that lovers love each other because they want to be, they think they'll be happy as a result of it. So, famous definition of love. Love is the promise of happiness. Right? You love the other person because you think by living with them or being together with them, or right, that's going to enhance or increase or be a big part of your happiness. That you be happy together. That's what we say. May you be happy together. Right? And that thought is that if you knew you were going to be unhappy, there'd be an issue of why. So then it would be something like amour fou, right? It would just be crazy love, in which you, even though you know it's going to make you miserable, you can't stop. It would be like an addiction. So, right, the thought is that in love of another person, there's a further thing that the love of the person is for, and that further thing is happiness. So the explanation for why John loves Mary is that John thinks that something with Mary will make him happy. And then there's a question of just what that is. What are you planning to do with Mary that will make you happy, John? Well, some of what we know, right? They're probably going to sleep together and do other fun things together. But that's only part of it, right? So the thought is, what are you going to do? Are you going to live together, be together, stuff like that? And then there's got to be some more that you're doing too. Okay? So we've moved from, right, love is a relation. What is the nature of the features of the relata that make the loving relation, that ground or the loving relation? Well, they're the very ones that ground all desire, and therefore love. And this is the way Diathema goes. Says, well, love is just, that name has just corralled a little piece of the natural unity of desire and kind of focused our mind on it. But really it's the whole thing that we want to see, and love is just part of desire, and all desire is ultimately for happiness and for nothing else. So the lover is in the business of eudaimonic loving and no other business. And so that's very important. We hold on to that thought. We've got the further question, what are the lovers going to do with each other that will result in their happiness? And that's a question that Diathema is going to make her major contribution to. And then there's the question which she raises of how long do they want happiness to be theirs? So that's the next question, and the answer to that, she says, is, well, they want to be theirs forever. So there's no time limit. No matter what I specified as the time, you'd be just as, you'd want to extend it if it could be extended. It's not like you think, well, I just want to be happy for a day, thanks. Right? But you'll always be willing to extend it. Well, what about 2 days? It's not like the old joke about Philadelphia, right? First prize, 2 weeks in Philadelphia. Second prize, 1 week in, no, it's the other way around. First prize, 1 week, second prize, 2 weeks. It's not as if the thought is, more is worse, a little is good. It's not like that. More is always better of happiness. And since more is always better, more time to have it is always better too. Now once we get the time factor built in, we've got a question. Well, we're not going to be around forever. We're not gods. So instantly a question arises about the temporal horizon of our love relation. And that's a very potent question. That's what we were seeing last time. So if we were gods, it'd be a timeless X, a timeless L, and a timeless Y, right? So this would be, that's bad. This would be X, L, Y, and there'd be that would be like this, 2 plus 2 equals 4. We don't ask when is 2 plus 2 4, or when will it stop being 4, or when did it start being 4. We introduce this lovely philosophical notion, timelessly 2 plus 2 is 4. Right? And that's just, at the minimum, that's just a way of saying, oh, Mary, don't ask about where you put in time variables. You don't need them for this. right? But you do need them for this. If the gods don't, the gods love, as if we go with the euthyphro, right? The gods love pious things. And they don't love them today and not tomorrow, and they don't start loving them the next day, and they didn't start one day. They always love them, they always will love them. They'll always be around to love them. The pious things will always be around. That's the nature of divine loving. So when Augustine in the Confessions says, you know the trouble with loving Mary? I'll tell you. She'll either leave you or she'll die. Right? Bummer. Or she's not always around. Right? I mean, that's Mary. She's not always around either. What you want is a Mary who, A, is always around, B, will never stop loving you, and C, won't die. Who is Mary? God. Oh, well, and maybe Mary. Actually, for that, if there is no God and Mary is his mother, then we should definitely go with Mary. In this one, you need time. Yes? And when you need time, you have to ask yourself, how do you index the three things temporally? So, right, you can just think that you're indexing the whole proposition. So it's just this, X loves Y at time t. But you can also put in time variables for each of the relata and the relation. So you can ask, so at t now, limerence, passion, day 2 of the love relation that will soon lead to marriage. T, the X, the L, and the Y are X now, L now, Y now. And if we say love at the start of a loving relation is one kind of thing, right, has one set of features, and the relata have one set of features, and then later, after the limerence period is over, right, the love has taken on a different shape and form, and so have the two beloveds. And then it goes on. Now they get to be very old. It's like in Haneke's great film, Amour, a very old couple loving one another. That's got to be very different, with very different focus. There's going to be similarities, yes, but love itself should be taken as something that has a temporal profile. The love has a temporal profile, as well as the two beloveds. They're going to age, and because they're going to age, what it is for them to love each other has to be seen as something that develops and changes over time. And when they enter into it, they're entering into a relationship that's like that. So now, look what's happened, right? We started with blathering about, love is, he's a little guy with a bow and arrow, or a beautiful God. To love is a certain kind of relation. To love has an object, namely, what's the reason for this? Well, it's got to lead to happiness. That's the ultimate explanation for why you do anything, so it's the explanation for why you love. We've got the temporal jazz that's helping us to articulate further the love. We shouldn't be thinking this. When I think about love, I think about Romeo and Juliet. That's a bit like this. Happiness is a warm blanket, or happiness is being a grandparent, or stuff you put on a bumper sticker, or a Hallmark card, Don't think about it too much. Like, is happiness a warm blanket on a really humid 90-degree? What about being a grandparent? Well, what about being Hitler's grandparent? think that's going to make you happy? All you have to do is think for 2 seconds, right? And you think, oh, no. But it's a feel-good moment, right? So if you think, when I think about love, I think about Romeo and Juliet. Or I open People magazine and I see 2 22-year-old movie stars who are into each other, and I think, that's love. Okay. If that's your image of love, I want to present you with the same people at 85. Right? That's the thought. We can't we better not concretize on any particular moment in a love story and say, that's the paradigm. Why? Well, that's going to get us a whole big load of false expectations, false beliefs. It's a bad measuring stick for what love is. And what Diathema does is to, by introducing these ideas, she gets you to see that your measuring stick has to be quite different from that. It's got to be a measuring stick that takes account of development in X, L, and Y. So last time I told you I developed her story in a certain way. What you want when you start with this limerence period, you're really into each other, and it leads you to want to get married or to form a relationship or maybe to think about having children together, setting up household, doing all those kinds of things that birds who couple do and that we do as well, right? Doing all that stuff. But you're thinking this, right? When you say, I want to be loved for myself, or I don't want to be loved for some extraneous features of myself, what you're thinking is, how you want that relationship that started now to figure in the psychology of each of the two relata. You want them, as I put it last time, to take seriously the nature of the relationship that they stand now to that person, recognizing that that relationship is going to change over time, if it changes in the good way. That is, you can sort of project a kind of norm of a temporal profile for good loving over a lifetime, and then think that, well, that's what you'd like to have, right? And that clues us into this question, right? When X loves Y, what is it that Y wants to do? What is it that X wants to do with Y, right? And so that will give us the temporal profile. And what Diathema says, so that we've got all of this stuff, you figured, right? So what in Elling Y does X want to do? Well, of course, we can start a laundry list, right? He wants to spend a lot of time just looking at Y, right? It's like all those pictures of the Virgin with the infant Jesus and medieval paintings. That's a big part of what you get a clue. Love, the look of love is a very distinctive look. And part of loving another person is looking at them with love, right? That's part of it. So we can be put off when our beloveds or lovers don't give us the right look, right? We want that nice look. When mom looks at her little baby, right, that's a little image of one kind of interplay of the eyes. That's also what leads us to all that stuff about the blow of the eyes, the coup des yeux when we fall in love, right? And of course the thought, well, if you look at another person's wife or another person's girlfriend or boyfriend in a certain way, that's a challenge, right? Who do you think you're looking at that way, right? So there is a looking part of it. That's one of the things you want to do. And moreover, you want to be together with the other person. You want to spend time with them. You want to see them. You want to do things with them. You want to make love with them. You want to have dinner with them. You want to, right? That's all part of what you want to do. But now we want a general characterization of it. So this is Diathema's question. What is this is what she says you're asking, what is the ergon of love? And ergon is usually translated as function, but also a good translation is work. We get the notion of an erg as a unit of work from the same verb in Greek from which we get ergon. So she says, that's when you're asking, what does X want to do with Y? When X loves Y, you're asking this question, what's the function of love? What's the ergon? What's the work? So you think about it this way, what does X want to do to Y? What work does he want to do together with Y? That's what the question has now become. You all grooving along? Yeah? Yeah, yeah.
So I understand why we'd want temporal indexes on the relata, x and y.
Yeah.
And I can also understand why we would want to index the relation itself, the L relation.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering why we want to say that it's a temporal index rather than like there's different kinds of love. Like it seems to me if we put it in terms of time, then that assumes that there's like the correct way to love at each time. Like in the beginning stage, there's limerence, and then that fades away, and there's something else that's appropriate.
Yeah.
But like, that doesn't seem right to me. Like if there's a relationship where two people love one another and they happen to be in limerence forever,
oh, no,
that's great.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But notice that this is going to apply to any kinds of, broadly speaking, norms in areas like this, right? Which is, this is, roughly speaking, what you should be expecting when you get into, well, it's not telling you this. This is what you have to do, right? It's telling you, well, roughly, if for example, you find that limerence has evaporated after year 3, well, don't start thinking there's something wrong with your relationship. There may not be anything wrong with it at all, right? So let me tell you, I just happen to be reading this, so of course I have to tell you about it, because what else am I going to do? So here's a really interesting question. And the interesting question is, why are men far more sexually excited by visual pictures of genitalia than women are? Presume that it's a fact. It seems to be. Right, so why is that? And it's very hard to give an explanation. You think, what is it about guys and genitals? What do they want to look at them for? Right? Well, here's the answer in part. Having an interest in female genitalia had an evolutionary advantage. Right? Don't ask me why, but that's the story, and then there's a little backstory about what kind of an evolutionary advantage it gives you. And so maybe so now notice like this. Suppose you really like looking at nude pictures of genitals and naked pictures of genitals, and you think that you think this would be a great thing to share with your girlfriend. So you think, hey, listen, you know what I thought we'd do tonight? And she said, oh man, I don't see why you want to look at those. I mean, you know, it's kind of, there's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't interest me very much, right? Don't think that your girlfriend is kind of, weird, or you're not suited to one another, or there's something the matter with her. Why? Well, that's not what's going on. So think of it that way, right? That doesn't mean that two happy genital lookers can't match up. Right? You think, what are we going to do tonight? And even newer genitals to look at, right? More. Great. Can't have too much of that. Right there. That may not, right? That's a possibility. There's nothing wrong with it. It's rather about what you should be expecting, so to speak. That's the thought. So these norms are not directives. They're bits of folk wisdom, bits of sort of internalizable knowledge about relationships that can serve you well in your relationship. You don't have to match up to it. You have to utilize it intelligently to see them. And this is true about all diets, nearly everything that you can come up with. You need to personalize them, and these are only rough guidelines, rules of thumb, so to speak. They're not absolute things. Okay. So what we're asking is the work or function of love. And here's Diathema's stunning answer, unexpected, and then we have to fill it out. It's the giving birth in beauty. Tokos in kalo. And you're like, it is? Well, what does that mean? And it, I think, guides us into some really significant, deep, and interesting material. Initially, it looks weird, and by and large, the interpretations of it justify it in looking weird, since they were weird too. But actually, there's a very simple way to understand it, which I think is the correct way. So in Greek, we have in with the dative, and we want to understand, there are many ways to understand that. What are we talking about? And I think people thought this, right, initially, something like this. Well, look, think about actual sexual reproduction. the semen gets ejaculated into the female's vagina, and that's what it means to give birth and beauty. It means to inject something into something. That's the sort of thought. That's in that way, right? That's the image, and then it's just taken over from there and utilized without further thought. And I think that's only partly right. That's sort of not the right story, but it's not entirely wrong either. The thought is really this. Giving birth and beauty is wanting to perpetuate what you find valuable in the thing that attracts you to your beloved. So think about it this way. So when you love Y, right, you find Y beautiful. And just accept that, beautiful here, as the thing that attracts you to Y that's fairly readily accessible at the start, so it could be physical appearance, but that has more to it than that. So that'll get you in. It won't keep you in, though, unless there's not more to it than that. So it's a bit like this, right? So, you know, when you read a novel, maybe a big novel, and you read the first couple of pages, if the first couple of pages don't succeed in hooking you, your sense of wanting to go on is going to diminish. And if you're still in that stage when you get to 50 pages, you might just think, oh, the hell with it, I'll read something else, right? Think of a person as like a book, right? The opening page has got a, so there, it's across a crowded room, there's Mary. If nothing about Mary attracts you, why are you going to walk over there rather than over here? Or Frank, right? Nothing about Frank. Frank is like a dark object out there. Nobody wants to walk in Frank's direction, right? Maybe Frank is really interesting, but you have to get through the first 50 pages that are pretty boring before you start getting to the interesting stuff. Well, that's not a good hook, right? So we all have to be able to hook one another somewhat to get to the next interesting stage where, you know, the ephemeral attractiveness opens itself up, and we see that there's more. Not only is there that initial attractive, but there's more stuff too. It actually keeps going. Yep. So this is the blue-footed booby, shows the pretty blue foot. The female sings, good, that's the beginning. Notice that if she doesn't go beyond, she looks at the foot and thinks, yeah, that's it, that's finished. Right? So, and for the boobies, right, that's the first line of the first page. The game's over if the novel doesn't have the right shade of blue print, that's it. There's no further reading goes on. So we call that initial attractor beauty, and then agree that while it's got this attractor part to it, it can have a lot more to it too. It can keep deepening. You can see more and more of what's attractive if you keep exploring. That's the thought. So now, here's this. X falls in love with Y because he finds Y beautiful. And what he wants to do is he wants, using that beauty as his model of what he is in the business of, he wants to reproduce it. And what does that mean? Well, in part is this, right? He wants to reproduce his relationship with Y as somebody who has the beauty, right? So it's not like this, right? He's attracted to Y, she's beautiful, but this is the way beauty works for human beings, or some human beings. They have it on a Monday, but not on a Tuesday. So on Monday, it's there. On Tuesday, it's gone. But there's a way to keep it, though. How do you keep it? Well, you keep it by loving Y. If you love Y, the beauty stays in place. But if you stop loving, the beauty goes away, right? So now the thought would be, X wants to keep Y beautiful, knowing, however, that Y's beauty is, first of all, not just skin deep, and moreover, is not going to stay the same. What's beautiful in an 18-year-old is not beautiful in a 40-year-old, and vice versa. One of my gay friends, who had been a beautiful 18-year-old surfer boy, right, and had trouble moving out of that role as he moved towards 50, and still dressed like a surfer boy, right? You know, so after many months in therapy, his therapist said, you know, X, you're a really terrific looking 50-year-old, but you're not a very attractive 18-year-old. It was kind of epiphanic, right? It was like, oh, man, okay, well, I should be 50 then, right? And that's the thought, right? And we all know it, right? We all know that we're not going to stay 18 forever. And we're not going to have those looks or those interests or that mindset or that way of being in the world or those occupations and preoccupations. That's all going to change. And what you want is that why grow in that beauty to which you're attracted and being attracted to her. So you want her to stay, right, in the relevant way, having the features that attract you at the start, and that you, in loving, adapt your love to those new features. You have to make it all dynamic, right? And once you make it dynamic, you see what you're after. But you want more than that. So that's just you and why. But another way to proceed is to think in terms of this. You want to produce Z that embodies, right, the love relation you have with Y. So you want together to love something Z as a result of your loving the children. So take that as the part that's kind of borrowed from normal reproduction. So Diathema takes in ordinary biological reproduction a fact, namely that human beings want to reproduce with the ones they love. And here's the thought, when you want that, what you want to do is you want to produce someone who has the features that attracts your love, that has the beauty that attracts your love for each other, so that you'll love it too. And those features are, well, in part, right, this thought, because our genes, because I'm speaking our language, because our genes pass on to our children will have some of the same physical traits that we do. So some of the things, so you can think, she looks just like her mother, right? Or he's got your nose, right? And that's actually the way we do talk about children, right? We talk about them having aspects of each other's bodies that we find attractive. And then, moreover, we're going to socialize them, bring them up, shape them, transmit our values to them, to make them or help make them the kinds of people that we think it's good for people to be. Right? So we're not just transmitting our genes, we're transmitting our cultural norms and values to them too. So we think, right, and we use, unfortunately, we do this, right? We approve of them and love them and are enthusiastic about them when they do the kinds of things that we think are valuable. And we have a harder time doing that when they do things we think are not valuable. And we're shaping them in various ways to become things that we can love. That's what giving birth and beauty is for when it takes the straightforward biological reproductive form. Okay, let me stop there and see if everyone gets that. So let's just, this is the reality, as I would say. This is the story I think I would want to tell, mapping it onto the Diathema story in a reasonably straightforward way. When people want to have children for good reasons, and they're thoughtful parents, and all the things are going reasonably well, they want to have children because they think that they can love children in the way that children need to be loved, and because they want to be loved by children in the way that they think children can love them. Those are very good reasons for having children. Good reasons for adopting children too, but they're good reasons for having them, right? And now the thought is, we're not neutral with respect to whether or not our children will be children like that. Why? Well, in just the way that the lovers don't develop independently of one another, if they take their loving relation for each other seriously, they develop in the way they do, in part because they love the people they do. In wanting to take the relation seriously, you're wanting that the decisions you make about what you'll do, what you'll value, what activities you'll engage in, are in part, right, respectful of the relationship you have with the other person. To have them be disrespectful is instantly to violate what love requires of you. That doesn't mean you have to do everything they do or anything else like that. It's that your decisions about who you're going to become should reflect the relationship you're in with the other person. Similarly, with a child, you're going to try to shape the child, right, much more consciously than you will with each other in different ways, because it has no autonomy at the beginning to be respected. You do what you can to help them to become people who are valuable and who value things that are worth valuing and that you can see the value in, and that so that they'll see the value in you. They'll think, I've got good parents. Why? Well, because I see what good they do and what good they do me. And they see that's the ideal. There are all kinds of factors that are complicating it all, because in developing their own autonomy and independence, children have to rebel somewhat from the values of their parents, and that's normal stuff too. And parents have to understand that. So a parent who doesn't understand adolescent rebellion is not going to be a good parent of an adolescent. Whereas they may have been excellent parents of small children. So not all of us are really good at all the aspects of parenting. We have to also become good parents of increasingly independent beings who no longer can tolerate being directed by us to do everything. We have to let them be free and hope that at the end of the day they'll still value things that we find worth valuing. Maybe they'll be able to teach us to value things that we don't value now. It's not a one-way street. So that's what giving birth in beauty is, when giving birth in beauty takes the form of biological reproduction. So that's the first take. But then Diathema has another take. Right? That's when the kind of beauty that attracts X to Y is that kind of beauty, the kind that is amenable to or best captured by biological reproduction and the bringing up of children. But not all love is like that. Not all love is going to be focused on that kind of giving birth and beauty. So what other kinds are possible? So the next big step is to see that X and Y can fall into one of three psychologically significant groups, these are just idealizations, ways to get your mind around something. So we can ask about X and about Y. So the story we've told so far, I'm going to say, is about appetitive people. That is, people whose conception of the good, we're going to just say, is focused on appetitive reproduction. It's sexual because sexual is an appetite, and this is the form of reproduction it takes. It takes the form of biological reproduction. But there's another sort, spirited. And again, these are just terms to be filled out. And there's a third kind, which is rational. And think of these as three different love stories that have significant resemblances to one another, enough so that giving birth and beauty applies to all three. Okay? So let's take a case like this. We do think this way when we think about the test of time as an aesthetic value. We talk about great works of art as things that have withstood the test of time. We think of great philosophy this way too. Plato has stood the test of time. Most things don't. About a month, then it's finished, or maybe 3 if you're lucky. Just read old copies of pick your favorite great journal, the Phil Review, Journal of Philosophy. Go back about 25 years and pick out all the things that are still players in the philosophical game. Book, year, 2 years, maybe then it's gone. Right? To last is hard. Right? Oh, stuff we're reading, 2,500, nearly it's a long time. Right? So we can think about that this way. Right? So now we want to talk about the test of time. And the reason we want to talk about it is because we have this notion. We wanted happiness to be ours forever, but we're not eternal beings. So how do we get something like eternity? How do we pass the test of time for longer than the brief time that we're actually biologically alive? And so here's the thought that Diathema has. She thinks about an honor lover like Achilles. Someone who dies fighting, achieves incredible athletic, warlike success, is a great model for what a great soldier, a great hero is like. Why do we still remember him? Why hasn't he just disappeared into the mists of time? Well, it's in part because he got described by a great poet, Homer. Right? But if we ask why Homer developed a picture of somebody like Achilles, we're back to why is Achilles so attractive that Homer developed this way of thinking about someone like him rather than somebody else? What goes on when Achilles thinks about his future? He thinks this way. As we say, I want to be remembered. I want a memorial to me. I want people to remember who I am. I want to be part of the future. And so he has to think two things. Not this way. Not give birth to children of my body. Why? Well, there's no guarantee, first of all, that children of my body will share my picture of me as an honor. They might, but as time goes by, that becomes increasingly unlikely, right? That I'm just going to be my descendants that somehow or other value their valuable ancestry, right? Instead, and that won't, even if they are my descendants, if they change their values, they won't value that anymore. I think this is true of us, for example. We don't value the kind of military prowess and sort of heroic self that Achilles, we don't want to be that person. That's not a possible role in a world like ours. But we can still see there's something really pleasing about it, something elegant and beautiful about it, even if we don't want to be it. We can see the value of it. We can see the value of reading about it and understanding it, even if we are no longer eager to pick up our sword and go out and fight on the battlefield. Well, what Achilles has to want in wanting eternity is that he should give birth to tradition in which virtues like his are valued. Right? As long as that tradition survives, Achilles' value will be visible. If the tradition dies, it won't be anymore. So he won't have succeeded in giving birth in beauty, except by doing something else. He has to give birth to a tradition, a culture that passes itself on to future generations that continue to value the things that he's got. Think of an artistic tradition. Actually, I'll give you an even more vivid example. Plato founded a school, so did Aristotle. Plato's school, the Academy, lasted 1,000 years until the ancient universities, the pagan universities, as they were called, were closed down by the Christians. But there was an ongoing tradition in the Academy, and Plato's works were preserved there. New copies were made, editions were developed. So we've got all of them, as far as we know. And we've got catalogs from other sources, and we can tick them off, and we don't think, oh, look at all the ones that are missing. We go over to Aristotle, the Lyceum, it's a completely different story. There, the school stopped after Aristotle's death, which was early, 64 or so, Plato lived to be 80. left his library to one person and the running of the school to another is a very bad idea, right? And as a result, we have only fragments of Aristotle's ways. We know the catalog. He wrote dialogues, huge number of dialogues that Cicero was able to read. We don't have any of them. What we have are lecture notes and fragments of treatises and other things, 2,000 odd pages of them, granted, but we know that they're just fragments of a much larger edifice which we don't have. Why? I just told you why. If the Lyceum had lasted 1,000 years, we'd have all of them. Why? Well, because the people in the school valued Plato as an eminent philosopher whose works had perennial and persistent value. Nobody did the equivalent of for Aristotle. Aristotle fell into oblivion and was forgotten, only to finally be rediscovered and worshipped and used, right? And then for 2,000 odd years, nobody could think anything except Aristotelian thoughts, which is pretty good too, especially if they come in fragments, right? So that's an important, and the notion of a tradition becomes the most significant form of cultural reproduction. Cultures that don't succeed in forming a tradition, by which I mean institutions for passing culturally acquired knowledge onto the next generation, simply disappear as cultures. You need to have the institutions to pass on your culture. If it's a very complex culture, like ours, you need lots and lots of complex institutions. You need universities and schools. You need music academies. You need schools of painting. You need cooking schools. You need, right? You need a vast array. What are they for? They're to reproduce. They're reproductive institutions. The primitive form of, the basic form of reproduction is biological reproduction. If you don't have any babies, that's the end of the story too. Right? But it's not enough to have babies for the story to continue. You need to be able to give them the accumulated resources of the past in a usable way. And that means they've got to be available and the people have got to value them. So imagine that you've got a massive archive. You've got everything. A huge library. You know, Borges's library. It's got everything in it. And then some, right? But nobody wants to go there. Or people have forgotten the languages and nobody wants to learn them. So suppose we had all of Aristotle's works, but nobody could read ancient Greek anymore. Then it would be as if we didn't have them. So we need to transmit, right, not only the hardware, but the software too. You've got to be able to use them. So that's what giving birth and beauty is for somebody who values something that you can't get just by biologically reproducing and then bringing up your child. You need more than that. You need a richer cultural set of things in order to transmit the heroic values that are embodied by someone like Achilles. You've got to transmit that too. So that's the giving birth. So suppose you're attracted to someone because they are Achilles, right? So the beauty that attracts X to Y is the beauty of Achilles. And the one they want to reproduce in is that beauty. Then that's going to lead them not to have sexual intercourse. It might, but not if the other beloved is another man. You can't do that. What you're going to do is you're going to want to set up institutions and so on that transmit the values in such a way that people who are part of it value it too and keep it alive, as we say. Keeping alive the tradition is giving birth and beauty. The last part, and then we'll take a break. Okay, what's rational? So now there are people, let's call them the philosophers, right? They want to give birth and beauty too. Why? Well, because part of valuing what they value, given that they're temporal creatures, has got to be recognizing the temporality of themselves, what they're transmitting, and who they're transmitting it to. So let's take a philosophy class at the elementary level, if there is such a thing. Right? so an introductory philosophy class. You take embryos, embryonic philosophers, and you try to give them, right, the kind of philosophy that will help embryonic philosophers grow into the next stage, right? There's no point in treating them as if they're already in the pantheon of godlike figures. They aren't yet, right? You've got to feed them the right sort of stuff to get them to grow as philosophers. Then the next layer of courses, right, takes them a little further. You keep trying to grow them up, right, as far as you develop, grow it up, so that they'll be the next generation of facilitators, right, contributors to the tradition, and trainers of the next generation in the tradition. You're giving birth in beauty. It's generative, right? You're reproducing. If you don't succeed, philosophy will disappear. If there had been no Timotheus, Aristotle says, there'd be no Phrynis. And what he means is, we all should pay attention, right? Look, even if you're not one of the greatest philosophers the world has ever seen, even if you're not Plato, Aristotle, Kant, Hegel, Marx, and most of us aren't, right? You're still doing something without which there will never be a Marx or a Hegel in the future. You're keeping alive a tradition within which somebody like that can grow up. If there's no tradition, that's impossible. You can't get a great violinist if A, there are no violins, or B, no schools in which people are taught how to play the violins, or no audience for anybody to play, so you can't make a living being a violinist. All these things are required. That's giving birth in beauty, too. In the beauty that attracts you to another person. So as a philosophy teacher, maybe it's this, that you see that somebody's got the capacity to be a philosopher, and you want to develop it because you care and value that. So now you're giving birth in a different kind of beauty. So all three of these relations are loving relations. They all have the same shape and form. Loving an embryonic philosopher or first-year student and loving a graduate student are really different. You can't treat the graduate student the way you treat the neophyte. You can't do the reverse either. You have to learn to simultaneously respect growing autonomy, right, and inculcate a discipline. That's very, just like with a parent, it's a difficult task. Give you your head, right, let you pursue something, even though maybe I'm not sure it's going to go anywhere. Try to guide you so that it will go somewhere without stifling you or getting you to just say what I say. Right? That's the goal. That's giving birth in beauty too. So now once we're there, right, we see, as Plato says, look at the vast sea of beauty. Don't just look at the beauty of a beautiful person, right, the physical beauty of a person. Think of the vast sea of beauty that has been made available when we think about reproducing in the beautiful this way, right? That you're still, this is all recognizably doing the same kind of reproductive work. Okay, so let's stop there, and after a 5-minute break, we'll come back and see